Hey guys, it is Michelle and I am here with my December-January physical book haul. I think there are 27 books in all. So I believe this month I have hauled over 50 books. So most of these are going to be sitting on the TBR for quite some time, but I'm anxious to show you what I got anyway. I placed an order through Scholastic through the school. The reading teacher sends little flyers home with the kids, and I saw this book when I was nosing through one of them. It is called Bomb. And it is by Steve Sheinkin, and it is a nonfiction book about developing the atomic bomb, the world's greatest weapon. So looking forward to getting into that at some point. Also ordered My Friend the Enemy. The author is Dan Smith, and this is about a young man who is in a wartime and an enemy's plane crashes near his home, and the pilot survives, and he feels it's the right thing to do to help the pilot, even though he belongs to the enemy, so hence the name My Friend the Enemy. Then I picked up Catherine Ryan Hyde's Pay It Forward. I saw the movie ages ago, and she has become one of my favorite authors since, but I've never actually read the book. I am terrible at reading a book after I've seen the movie, so we'll see if I can ever motivate myself to get around to this one, but I would like to. Then there's The Saturday Boy by David Fleming. This is about a young man whose father is in the army, stationed in Afghanistan, and every Saturday he gets a letter from his dad, and he worries about maybe Saturdays that letters don't come. So next is Counting by Sevens by Holly Goldberg Sloan. And this follows a young woman who I believe has some form of Asperger's or autism, something like that. And to comfort herself, she counts by sevens. And lastly from that order was Contaminated by M. Garner. This is a dystopian where people are acting like zombies, but not because they've been bitten by someone who's undead, but because they drink contaminated diet soda. And I am a huge drinker of Diet Coke. And so this one, of course, appealed to me because it's just fascinating that they're thinking of Diet Coke or diet drinks as the culprit in a zombie-like state. So then I went to Barnes & Noble and I decided to pick up a second poetry collection. I cheesed a little bit when I was choosing my first poetry collection for the Read Harder Challenge, and I actually enjoyed it more than I thought. So I picked up this one by Robert M. Drake. It is called Beautiful Chaos. The poems are not that long, but the language is a lot more figurative, and so we'll see how I deal with this one when I get around to it. The reason I went that day was to pick up by Maya Van Wagenen, Popular. And she's a modern day girl. She published this when she was only 13 years old. She found a 1950s guide to being popular and decided to follow it in today's world. And then she documented the experience, and this is her memoir. So looking forward to reading that. I picked up on a great Barnes & Noble online sale, The Age of Miracles by Karen Thompson Walker. And I had no idea the book and cover were this way, but I love it. When you take the dust jacket off, it's supposed to look like stars. And so there are little holes in there, and the cover is actually like the profile of a young lady that you are following in this story. She's about 13 years old. She lives, I believe, in California, and the Earth has started to spin more slowly, and they believe it is stopping, which of course is going to be a catastrophe. So it's kind of, I think, an end of the world series through the lens of a 13-year-old girl's perspective. So looking forward to that one. I also picked up Jasper Ford's Shades of Grey, not to be confused with that other book that has the number 50 in it. I think this is a dystopian, and there's something in here about the way humans have evolved. They can see only one color, and kind of how clearly you can see that color determines kind of your station in life, and just kind of weird stuff like that. It just sounds kind of fun and funky, and I wanted to see what it was about. I've heard a lot about Jasper Fforde books, but never read one myself. And I was very excited that this book was on that sale, and that was The Night Film by Marissa Peschel. And every booktuber I have seen review this one has said it is just such an experience to read it with all the documentation inside, and just a unique reading experience. So looking forward to that. I picked up some used books online, ones that I either couldn't get cheaper another way or couldn't get it all another way. The first is Marley's Ghost by David Levithan, and the illustrations are by Brian Selznick, who is the author of The Invention of Hugo Cabret and Wonderstruck. So This is a retelling, I believe, of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, but instead of being Christmas related, it is Valentine's related. So last year I picked up The Lover's Dictionary by David Levithan around Valentine's, and I wanted to read something else that was kind of lovey-dovey around Valentine's this year, and that's what I went with. Also picked up Stiff by Mary Roach, and this is The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers, and it basically is a microhistory, and it tells things like how have human cadavers been used to advance, what we know about the human body and things like that. So I have heard that after finishing this book, you will definitely want to be cremated instead of donating your body to science, but we shall see. I also picked up a former library copy of Ask the Passengers by A.S. King, and this is about a young girl who is confused about her sexuality, and she doesn't feel comfortable talking to the people in her life about it, so she lays in the backyard. She lives near an airport, and as passenger jets go overhead, she has imaginary conversations with those passengers, trying to get advice from them. At the local bookstore, I picked up The Angel's Game by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. I watched, I believe it was, I can't remember which booktuber it was. I watched one of the 2014 kind of end of the year videos, and I think they had 3 Carlos Ruiz Zafón books on there, and they just really convinced me. And then the very next day, I was in a used bookstore and saw this for $2. The dust jacket is beautiful. The hardcover is beautiful, and it's in excellent condition. So I don't know why it was marked down to $2. They had others on their shelf that weren't even in this good a condition, that weren't clearanced out. So I'm not sure why that. Maybe I'll find one page that's like scribbled on or something on the inside, but I was kind of ashamed of myself when I got home and found out this is book 2. Comes after The Shadow of the Wind. That one's already on my TBR, so it will be quite some time before I get around to this, because I'll have to get to Shadow of the Wind first. And also used online, I ordered these 2 books, Sabine's Notebook, which is book 2 in the trilogy, and The Golden Mean, which is book 3 in the trilogy. I picked up the first book at the used bookstore earlier this year. I was really apprehensive about ordering these online, but it would have been so expensive to get new copies. I was afraid that inside all of these envelopes, some of the letters would be missing, but they are all there. And I mean, the worst thing about this is the condition of this dust jacket spine, and it's not terrible. It's taped back together. It's been loved, and I can deal with that for the excellent deal I ended up getting on those books. And lastly, I placed a bookoutlet.com order on Boxing Day. When I got my order, I opened it up and I pulled out my first book, and I was all excited. 1,000 Names by Django Wexler, and it feels so nice. It's that real smooth kind of cover, almost feels velvety or whatever. Set it aside, and then discovered nothing else in the box was what I ordered. I had gotten somebody else's order, and it just so happened that the first book I pulled out was the one book we had in common on that order. So I did have to wait another week and a half before I got my real order, but this is the rest of that order. I got by Matthew Dix, Memoirs of an Imaginary Friend. This follows an 8-year-old boy who still has his imaginary friend. I believe his name is Budo. And so, an experience of him growing up, and is he going to keep the imaginary friend or not? Then there's Something Real by Heather Demetrios, and this is about a young lady who has spent almost the entirety of her life on reality TV. I believe she's one of 12 kids or something like that. And she finally breaks free of it, but then she starts to get sucked back in, and she's not happy about that. Then there's The Paladin Prophecy by Mark Frost. This is a YA fantasy series, and this is the first in the series. It's about a young man who has some special abilities, and he's been trying to hide that fact from the government, but now they have found out, and he's in a training program, and of course they want him to use those abilities to benefit them, and not quite sure they probably care about him. The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison is next. This was one of the books that they read in one of my Goodreads groups called Flights of Fantasy, and I passed on it, but since then, the premise of it has really grown on me, and it's about a human, I believe, who ends up in the goblin world. I'm not exactly sure, but it is really, the more I've thought about it, the more I decided I do want to read this. And of course, the price was right with that 50% off on bookoutlet.com. Next is Masterpiece by Elise Broach, and the illustrations are by Kelly Murphy. This kind of has a Charlotte's Web feel to it. It's set in New York City in an apartment, and the young man gets a drawing set for his birthday or Christmas or something, and the beetle in the story uses him to make a miniature drawing. And so, of course, everybody thinks the little boy did it, and so it starts to get some attention, and the beetle has to keep doing more, and the little boy has to pass them off as his. So has kind of a Charlotte's Web feel to it, but I'm interested to see how I can contrast and compare the two. Next is Speak by Laurie House Anderson, and everyone in the high school that this young lady goes to is very upset with her because she called the cops during a party and got it busted up. But there was a reason, and she stops talking and then eventually reveals what I believe is going to be a horrific reason why she ended up calling the cops. So we will see about that one. Next is The Adoration of Jenna Fox, and this is about a teenage girl who's about 17, and she wakes up and they tell her she's been in a coma for a year after an accident, and she's trying to reconnect with her past by watching like old home movies and things like that, but things just seem off to her. Stories aren't adding up, and people won't talk about the accident that started all this, and she's starting to question who and what she really is. So, sounds a little intriguing. Next is A Leaf the Unseen, and I have thought about putting this book on my TBR many, many times, and I just couldn't avoid it when the price was this good. It is set in the Middle East, and it involves a hacker who is an activist trying to shield people who are political activists from their governments, and something goes wrong, and all of a sudden he is in the spotlight and about to be caught, and so there's an adventure after that. And lastly, we have Born Weird by Andrew Kaufman, and this is about a grandmother who gives a blessing to each of her grandchildren as they are born. But as they mature, they realize these blessings have really turned out to be curses and really impacted their lives greatly. So now they're adults and grandma is about to die, and so she has asked one of the grandchildren to assemble the others so she can remove the curses before she passes away. So I have no idea what to expect from this one, but it was just such a unique premise, I decided to gamble on it. All right, those are the new books going on the TBR shelves behind me, so wish me luck. Thank you so much for watching, and happy reading!